We tend to think of language as just a tool, right? It's something we use to describe the world around us. But what if it's way more than that? What if the words we use don't just point to reality, but actually help create it? That's the huge idea we're going to dig into today. So let's just put the question right out there. When we talk about big concepts like, say, justice or love or even humanness, are we pointing to something real that exists out in the world waiting to be found? Or are we actually inventing these things the moment we put a label on them? And that question, well, it throws us headfirst into our first massive philosophical debates. Okay, so the first battleground is all about whether ideas themselves, the actual meanings behind our words, are real. Are they just fuzzy thoughts rattling around in our own heads? Or do they have some kind of objective existence, completely separate from us? Philosophers call this the question of logical entities. To really wrap our heads around this, we've got to start with a philosopher named Frege. He made this absolutely crucial distinction. He said any sentence has a reference. That's the actual stuff in the world it points to. Physical things, people, data. But it also has a sense, and that's the objective logical idea behind it. This is why you can express the exact same idea, the sense, in English or French or Japanese. The words are totally different, but the underlying proposition, it's the same. Then the philosopher Karl Popper took this idea and just ran with it. He proposed that there are three distinct worlds. World 1 is the physical world, things you can touch. World 2 is your own private, subjective world of thoughts and feelings. But World 3, now this is where it gets wild. Popper said this is a real realm of objective ideas, the pure concept of humanness, the laws of math, scientific theories. For Popper, these ideas exist independently, whether we think about them or not. Now, as you can imagine, not everyone was on board with this whole third world thing. Empiricist philosophers like W.V.O. Quine thought this idea of a non-physical realm of ideas was, well, kind of spooky. Quine argued we don't need any of these mysterious, logical entities. For him, language isn't some magic portal to an abstract world, it's just a type of physical behavior, something we do. And this quote from Quine, it just nails his whole point. He's not interested in the sense of your words or the private thoughts in your head. He wants to know what in the real, physical world you are pointing to. He saw language as a practical tool we use to group together similar physical things. So a word like humanness doesn't name some mystical idea. For him, it's just a verbal shortcut for talking about the whole set of individual human beings. So, do we have to choose between this mystical third world on one side and just, verbal behavior on the other? Well, not necessarily. The philosopher Nicholas Wolterstorff offered this really fascinating middle ground. He argued that these big ideas, these universals, exist as a real realm of objective possibilities. Think of it like a giant cosmic blueprint. The idea of humanness is a real logical possibility on that blueprint, and each one of us is just a single actual instance of it. And this whole question of what's real and what's possible, it leads us right into our next huge debate. Is our language a clear window that gives us a perfect view of reality? Or is it more like a prison, trapping us inside its own structures so we can never see things as they really are? This is the classic showdown between realism and anti-realism. The realist says language is basically a clean window pane. It lets us see the world that's already out there, existing on its own. But the anti-realist says, whoa, not so fast. For them, language is more like a pair of glasses, and maybe even prescription glasses at that. We literally can't see the world without them, and the specific language we use, our particular prescription, shapes and organizes everything we perceive. Thinkers like de Saussure pointed out that words are basically arbitrary. There's no deep cosmic connection between the sound tree and the actual plant. Because of that, each language ends up building its own unique web of connections and differences, its own linguistic grid that it lays over the chaos of raw experience. And the result? Different languages don't just describe one world differently. In a way, they actually construct different worlds for their speakers. The philosopher Nelson Goodman had this absolutely brilliant analogy for how this works. He said, think about what science does. It tries to make sense of all the data points we get from experience. He said it's like a giant connect-the-dots puzzle. But, and here's the crucial twist, there are no numbers to tell you which dot to connect to next. So what happens? Well, you can connect the exact same set of dots and end up with completely different pictures, right? A star, a house, a boat, and they can all be perfectly coherent. For Goodman, scientific theories are just like that. You could have two totally different theories, like Aristotelian physics and Newtonian physics, that connect the dots of experience in completely different yet valid ways. They are, in his view, different worlds, and you can't really say one is more real than the other. But of course, the realists fought back. Hilary Putnam came along and argued that, okay, while our theories and our languages might change, they are all attempts to describe one single independent reality. He pointed out that some things just seem to be objectively real for everyone, no matter what kind of conceptual glasses they're wearing. Things like electrons, force fields, or what he called natural kinds, the fundamental structure of stuff, like water being H2O or gold being gold. He argued that our science is slowly but surely converging on these real features of the world. So here's the showdown in a nutshell. For Goodman, science is a creative act of world-making, using language as its medium. For Putnam, science is an act of discovery, a process of getting closer and closer to describing the one real world that's already there. And this debate, it cuts right to the heart of what we even mean by knowledge. All right, so this brings us to our final debate. And honestly, this is where things get really, really weird. If language can structure our world, and if there are real possibilities that don't get actualized in our world, then what about all the other worlds that could have been? I mean, we do this all the time, right? We talk about things that didn't actually happen. We say things like, if I had studied harder, I would have passed that test. Or, what if my first child had been a girl? These are called counterfactuals. But stop and think for a second. What are we actually talking about when we say those things? Are we just making up a little story in our heads? Or are we referring to something else? True to form, the anti-realist Nelson Goodman saw this as nothing more than a figure of speech. For him, talking about a possible world where you passed your exam is just a roundabout, hypothetical way of talking about this world. It's a useful linguistic tool, a semantical trick, he called it, but it doesn't mean that world actually exists anywhere. But other philosophers like D.K. Lewis and Alvin Plantinga said, hang on, it's not that simple. They argue that the very logic of these what-if statements doesn't really work unless you assume that the things you're talking about are real somewhere. This radical idea suggests that other possible worlds have a real objective status. And this isn't just an abstract game. Philosophers use this logic to explore massive questions about what makes you over time, and even, as Plantinga did, to make arguments for the logical possibility of God's existence. Okay, so after diving into logical entities, linguistic grids, and parallel universes, you might be wondering, why does any of this matter? It can feel like really abstract wordplay, but it all connects back to the most fundamental questions we can possibly ask. Think about the journey we just took. We started with a single word and asked what its meaning was. That simple question led us to ask if ideas themselves are real. That forced us to question whether we construct our entire reality with language. And that kicked the door open to the existence of other possible worlds. See? This isn't some niche academic thing. It is the main event, the arena where we debate the fundamental structure of reality itself. So we end right back where we started. But now we can see just how high the stakes are. The words we use are incredibly powerful. They might be windows, they might be glasses, they might even be the very building blocks of our reality. But if our language truly sets the limits of our world, it leaves us with one final, massive question. What, if anything, lies beyond?